we're committed to actively pursuing strong investment results for our clients. Milford, bringing you Newshub Late.
Tonight on Newshub Late, well, the lights are still on, but for how much longer? Warner Brothers announces plans to axe Newshub. The return of semi-automatic guns is on the table as the government pushes ahead with rewriting firearms laws. And the disturbing detail of what the alleged killer of this Sydney couple did with their bodies. Kia ora, good evening. Well, an earthquake rolled through this building and the New Zealand media industry today. Warner Brothers Discovery announcing it's proposing closing its entire New Zealand news operation. Almost 300 staff could lose their jobs if the plan goes ahead to shut down the newsroom as soon as June the 30th. The end, when it came, was swift and sharp. An email advising of significant changes sent to staff 48 minutes before they were told that the axe was falling.
This is a terrible announcement. There is no sugarcoating it, and I wish I could be standing up here with better news.
Head of Networks Glenn Kine made the announcement.
I've been very proud to be part of this organisation and part of the newsroom. Nothing prouder, actually. Nothing will ever compare. So this is the most difficult day.
The meeting lasting just an hour. After that came shock.
It was a bombshell. You know, we're TV3, we've had cuts and we've survived cuts in the past, but to lose the whole news operation and entity so entwined in the fabric of our society here in Aotearoa, it's absolutely heartbreaking.
A sentiment felt by everyone at 3, and many sceptical about the difference that their invited feedback will make.
You're inviting feedback and you listen to that. Will it change anything?
Has the potential to, of course.
Most staff I've spoken to don't believe that. What do you say to that?
And look, I fully expect that position, of course.
Kine says he will listen to proposals to keep the newsroom operating, including from external partners. He found out about the plan to possibly cut the news operation in late January.
Do you feel that you've waited a bit late to inform staff of this?
Well, I think the process that the organisation went through was one of evaluation. It wasn't a course of action at that point in time.
Head of Asia Pacific for Warner Brothers Discovery, James Gibbons, told staff that the news operation was no longer financially viable amid a massive decline in advertising and the economic downturn.
It's a loss-making operation and we couldn't see how that was going to turn around. Therefore, we proposed this option to be considered.
And hundreds of workers will lose their jobs.
It's about 75% of the workforce.
But you must have a number, an estimate. Like
well, if you plus minus that 75%, then it's closer to the sort of 300 level.
The Deputy Prime Minister has described Newshub's closure as an absolute disaster for New Zealand's democracy.
Well, frankly, for the 300 or so staff and their spouses and their family, this is an absolute disaster. But it's also a disaster for this country's democracy.
Usually a fierce critic of the media, today he became its advocate.
A critical part of any democracy and free society is a fourth estate, an independent fourth estate. And I'm concerned about where we're going now.
The Broadcasting Minister, though, seemed less concerned.
Now they have one choice. Are you comfortable with that? Well, there's Sky as well. There's a whole lot of other media as well.
And it's clear that the government will not be riding to the rescue.
I think it's highly unlikely, because essentially what I've said before is that there has been massive change in consumer habits and how media is being consumed.
There's now going to be, a significant national debate on the back of the news today. Around the role of media in New Zealand and journalism in particular, and what do those policy settings need to be so that there aren't ongoing events such as this.
But for 3, that debate will be too late. Well, Mark Jennings led this news organisation for 22 years and he joins us now. Mark, I'm going to put this in simple terms that we can all understand. This is a cluster, isn't it?
Well, I think you've left a word that usually follows cluster. Yes, it is a total cluster. What is TV3 now? You know, without a news service, it's not a proper TV station anymore. It's going to be probably a cable station run out of LA, and I don't see why New Zealanders would want to come and look at a station that doesn't offer something more to this country.
And you filled a vital hole there, didn't it? It feels grim. It feels like the government will not be riding to the rescue.
No, I think Christopher Luxon and Melissa Lee's response today, very poor. Just, you know, they are losing an iconic news service here, and they just don't seem to realise that. And for Melissa Lee to say, oh, there's Sky. OK, so what? Sky are going to go and start a full service news? That's not going to happen. That's just crazy. It just shows, I think, a level of ignorance amongst our politicians. The one politician who I usually don't agree with, Winston Peters, he got it right. It's a disaster, and it's a disaster for democracy in this country.
Yeah, well, what does it mean for news in this country? I mean, I think of places like the Press Gallery, and it feels crazy that one television network will be left to cover everything that happens there. Natural disasters, these are vital democratic functions for audiences, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Those big events need significant coverage. But also, I think, when you mentioned the Press Gallery, you know, politicians need different media organisations. They need two news services. Look, if you go to Australia, Victoria, say, state, roughly the size of New Zealand, it's got 3 commercial stations, 1 state broadcaster and some other regional stations. You know, New Zealand, 1 state-owned TV station. This is crazy, and the politicians should be trying to look for a serious remedy to this.
You have led this newsroom for over 2 decades. You were the news director here. Can you put into words what people are feeling in this building or who have been associated with this network? And there are many of them over the years.
Yes, and I think you saw Glenn there today, emotional and basically crying. And for people, I suppose, looking at that, they'd go, oh, you know, it can't be that bad. But what I think people don't realise here is that this network was built on the back of goodwill. Not only goodwill from the journalists and news producers that worked here, but the goodwill of others, companies who supported it, you know, organisations who gave us interview. Right back in my time, Ansett New Zealand pilots that flew tapes from Queenstown to Christchurch. It was built on all this goodwill. And it created a great esprit de corps amongst the troops. We didn't get paid as much as, you know, TVNZ journalists, but it didn't matter because we had this great culture here. And I guess today, that's gone.
Yeah, and that's why it's such a tough day, isn't it, Mark Jennings? Thanks so much for joining us here on Lates.
Pleasure.
On to the day's other news now, and the return of semi-automatic guns is on the table.